Welcome everyone to the Master of Journalism Information session. Name is Daniel Garcia, the Manager of Graduate Programs Administration here. We are going to be doing a Zoom. It's going to be a fairly casual information session. We're going to do a quick introduction to the program, and it's going to be mostly a Q&A for you guys to answer questions and let us know what you need to know. Before we get started, however, I want to, since we are in Toronto, I want to start with the land acknowledgement. Toronto is in the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. And we'd like to do the land acknowledgement, again, obviously to recognize people that have been in our territory before us and to acknowledge that we are guests in the land. And I encourage all of you guys to just do some research about wherever you're joining us, whatever part of the province, of the country, or around the world, just to understand a little more of the history of the land that you inhabit. All right, so we have with us today Marsha Barber, the Graduate Program Director for the Master of Journalism program, as well as Tanisha Boyd. She's the Graduate Program Administrator for the program. We'll speak with you guys and give you more information, but I want Marsha to start us off. Just talk about the program. Thank you much, Marsha. Take it away.
All right. So hi, everyone. I'm looking at the screen and basically I'm seeing names on black squares, white names, although Carol and Dunk, you've got a great photo up there. I would encourage any of you who feel comfortable, no pressure, but any of you who feel comfortable to video unmute, because it's kind of nice to be talking to faces, but up to you. And let me, hi, Sophie Yang. Hi, who am I seeing here? Sheila Reed, Violet Miles, Vaishnavi, Carolyn, and some names. So it's great to see you. Thanks for coming out. I'll give you a little taste of what you can expect if you come into the program over the 2 years, and then it's wide open for questions. I'm sure you've come here with lots of questions. So the way it works is this. You come into the program, you have what we call an MRP, or a Master's Research Project. And by the end of the 2 years, you'll have done a journalistic project. This is not an academic project, but it could be a documentary, a magazine article, a series of newspaper articles, podcast, whatever interests you. And the program leads up to that. That will be the culmination of the program. Now, starting in your first year, these are the kind of courses that you'll take. So in fall of first year, you do a course, we get you out there right away, covering the city. Because one of the advantages of the program is you're right here in Toronto. You can go out to the streets. I hope by then not wearing masks, but who knows? And you'll be doing coverage. So covering the city, reporting and data methods for journalists, urban politics and society for journalists. And that's a course where we deal with the bigger issues in terms of coverage and what journalists do, law and ethics for journalists. And then in the fall, these are the kind of courses you take. Producing the news, a digital journalism studio, narrative journalism, innovation and entrepreneurship in journalism. And I mention entrepreneurship because more and more people who are working in journalism are freelancing, are finding their own gigs. So the entrepreneurial aspect of journalism is much more important now than it would have been, say, even 5 years ago. In the summer, you're doing an internship, and you're doing an MRP1 workshop, we call it, where you start to work on that the big journalistic project, the MRP that I mentioned. Then, as you move into second year, you're doing a focus masthead. So you can choose to do a newsroom masthead where you're doing everything. You're doing some TV, some digital journalism, some print. You're focusing on that in a newsroom atmosphere. Or you can choose to do a magazine masthead where you're focusing on magazine production and magazine writing. You continue working on your MRP, and you also do a course in essential editing. Now, what starts to get really exciting in year 2 is you have all these advanced specializations. So you can choose a specialization, for example, in TV documentary. If your MRP is going to focus on documentary, you can choose that. We have a number of advanced specializations, including investigative reporting, health and science journalism, data journalism, photojournalism, business reporting, and we're adding some new ones to the mix. You can choose, along with undergraduates, you can choose to take a specialization in reporting on race or indigenous issues or gay issues, all of that. So those are some options that you might have in your second year. So lots of choice there. It doesn't mean we offer all of these at once, by the way. You might have a fairly limited choice, but there is some choice available to you. And then in the winter of year 2, you continue to be able to take advanced electives, unless you've taken the magazine masthead, in which case you're focusing very much on magazines and your advanced elective choices are a little more limited. And you continue working on your MRP. And then before you know it, you've graduated and you are part of the journalistic community. So that's what it looks like. And based on that, what I want to get to are your questions, because I'm sure you've all come in with some questions about this whole process. So who wants to jump in and ask? If you're not comfortable, you can put it in chat. I must say, I'm not looking at chat right now because I'm looking at your faces, but you can also put questions in chat, but it would be great if you just unmute video, even just audio unmute and ask a question, unless everything is absolutely crystal clear. And I hope you're getting your applications together because first consideration is mid-January. And I have to tell you the process. The committee meets very soon after that. So it's a real advantage to get your application in for first consideration by that January 18th deadline. I strongly encourage you to do so. Anything you're wondering about?
I have a question. Hi.
Hi, Paula.
How are you?
Okay.
In terms of that statement of interest, I think it says approximately 600 words. How picky are you in terms of the length?
Not particularly. When the committee looks at it, what we want to know, what the committee wants to know is that you are committed to journalism, you're passionate about journalism, and if it takes you 650 words to say that, nobody's sitting there actually counting the words. And I'm going to check with, I just want to check with Daniel and Tanisha. There isn't anywhere in the process, is there, where anyone's penalized for going over the word count? I didn't think so.
No,
So
it's pretty
flexible.
open. Yeah, pretty flexible.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything
Hi.
else?
Hi.
Hi, Violet.
How are you?
Okay, thanks. How are you doing?
Doing well, thanks. Yeah, I'm very interested in audio journalism and podcasting, and I know you mentioned that that seems to be an option for students at Ryerson, and I've seen some of that on your website, and that's great. I'm wondering what kind of technical resources are provided for students, if there's a studio on campus or something that students can access.
There is. We have a TV studio. during normal times, like right now, this semester, it's closed down, but during normal times, we have, you will have access to a TV studio. You do have access to radio and podcasting facilities, and there is a podcasting course offered, A, and B, when you do your MRP, you can frame it as a podcasting MRP. And related to what Violet just asked, I'll mention that a lot of people pitch a certain MRP coming into the program, but most people change. So once you've been in the program for a year, you may decide that you want to work in a different medium. You may decide that you want to work on an entirely different subject for your podcast or whatever. So we assume, you come in with an open mind and be prepared to change. The other thing, this is a question I get asked often, do you have to specify supervisors coming into the program? And I know on the application, you're asked to write down a couple of names for supervisors, but in reality, it doesn't mean anything. I mean, you need to do it to fill out the form, but you are assigned supervisors. So the way it works is at the end of the first year, you get a chance to indicate the supervisors ideally you'd like to work with. And then after that, you're assigned supervisors who may or may not be the supervisors you indicate on your application form. So it really doesn't matter which, look at the website, just because you should know about the program. It's kind of nice if you know who faculty are, so you know the people you'll be dealing with. But don't worry about finding, you don't have to find a supervisor the way you do in some grad programs. I'm just curious about,
question.
Okay, go ahead.
We have a question from the chat because she can't speak because she's in the library.
Okay. How important are portfolio items? Yes, they are important. I guess in terms of being an indication of your commitment to journalism, if you have portfolio items, if you've worked, for example, for a student paper, if you've done something digitally, portfolio items really do tend to impress people on the committee. So short answer, quite important.
Just want to also mention about the portfolio. If you decide not to submit a portfolio, just make sure that you submit basically a statement saying that you're not submitting a portfolio, because the system in the admissions will not send us your application until it's complete. So if you decide not to submit a portfolio, but you just leave it blank, the application is not it doesn't look at it's complete, so it still stays in the system. So make sure that if you're not submitting a portfolio for whatever reason, make sure you put at least a statement, a PDF with a note saying, I decided not to submit a portfolio or something, and then that way your application will be complete, and then actually it comes to us for review.
Okay, I see that Ryan, you are asking about the internships and whether you apply to them or you're placed in them. I guess the answer is a little bit of both. Some people seek out their internships and go to the internship coordinator and actually have started to arrange the internship. But you work pretty closely with the internship coordinator, and she has a list of contacts and whatnot. She meets with every single person and gauges what their interest is and where they'd like to do an internship. And then she advises you in terms of how to obtain that internship. So Ryan, does that answer your question? I hope so. You can tell me in the chat. Yes, it does, says Ryan. Okay, good. Asen, you have a question.
Hi, how are you?
Great. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much. I have two questions, actually. I recently moved to Toronto. I have been here like 2 months. I really into journalism, and I came from Turkey, and I had experience in Turkey. I did internship, a lot of internship, and I really want to improve myself on this field. But I don't have any idea about the field in Toronto and Canada, because I think that there is, I think, for example, in Turkey, there are a lot of international desks and international needs because of the, I think, location. But I don't have any idea about the Canadian news aspect. So can I work like, I know 2-3 languages. I can speak fluently in 2-3 languages. And can I use my skills and also do masters, and I can move this field in Toronto, and it is easy or it is a little bit complicated? I don't have any idea about this. My first question is this. And the second question is, I don't have enough score for IELTS. So
Don't
can
have
I
enough. Sorry.
IELTS, English, IELTS TOEFL score for admission for now. So can I apply and then give the score of my IELTS or TOEFL?
I think that's a question. The second question is a question for Daniel, I think.
I can just quickly for the IELTS. So the English language requirements or English language proficiency test, that's required as at the beginning of your application, because that's reviewed by admissions. So the process basically goes, just submit your application via the OUAC website. That's the first step. That then sends to Ryerson graduate admissions. They review your GPA and your transcripts, as well as your English proficiency tests and scores. So at that point, they will, if you don't have the score that's required, or if you don't have it at all, they'll basically hold your application at that point and probably communicate with you, letting you know if it's too low, for example. They'll let you know you need to either submit a new one or something like that. They won't send us the application until that's covered, if that makes sense. Until that requirement is fulfilled, basically. Okay, so you would have to have the do the test beforehand. Now, if you had any just an exception, so obviously if you studied in Toronto, well then no problem. If you studied any program in English, so like an undergraduate degree that was studied in English for at least 2 years, you can then just request a letter from that program saying that you studied for at least 2 years in English, and then you can submit that instead of the test course. If that is not the case, then one of the English language test scores will be required. Tanisha just posted the link on the chat for you, so you can take a look which other ones are available, because there's about 6 different kinds that you could potentially schedule between now and the deadline, and hopefully you'll get your test scores on time.
And the other part of the question, oh, go ahead. You had a follow-up, Asen.
Yeah, I think so. I have to get English test of then I have to apply, right? Otherwise, they're gonna hold. But
yes.
Hold doesn't mean that cancel, right?
No, it doesn't mean cancel. So, well, so if you don't submit a score at all, they will just hold it until you submit the scores, basically. You can submit your application because it is a 2-step process. So you could potentially start step 1, submit your application tomorrow even. That just basically tells the Ontario government website that to send Ryerson the information that you want to apply. So you could start that now. And then that basically, I think all it requires is your personal information, your academic information, like your schooling, what degrees you have, all that kind of stuff, as well as your contact information for your referees, whoever's going to give you the letters of recommendation. Okay, pay the fee, and that's done. So that then will stay in Ryerson's admissions until you submit the rest of the documents, which will be your English proficiency, your statement of interest, your CV, those kinds of things. Okay, but yeah, you can do the first part now, and then by the time you get your scores, hopefully ideally before the deadline, but if not, you'll still be in queue basically until you get those scores in there.
But I should give the English test before the deadline.
Ideally, just because of the review process, right? So because as soon as you get those scores in there, then admissions will send us your application, and then the review committee can review at the same time as everybody else. If for whatever reason you submit your test scores, I don't know, end of February, there's already been a review process, and we might still be able to review your application, but as you can imagine, I mean, many of them have already been reviewed, probably the majority of them. So there's likely the less spots After the deadline, you also maybe lose the opportunity for some scholarships and those kinds of things just because of the way deadlines work. So ideally, it will be by the January 18 deadline, yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'll just mention briefly before I get to Sophia, the second part of your question, the fact that you don't know about the Canadian media landscape isn't an issue because you'd learn about it really quickly. You'd be jumping in when you get here. It's a shifting landscape. It's in some ways a precarious landscape. Things are changing very rapidly. As I mentioned, a lot of the jobs in journalism tend to be freelance jobs. We do have traditional news organizations that do a little bit of hiring, but you would learn about that pretty quickly if you were here. Okay, Sophia.
Okay, thank you so much.
Hi, how are you?
Okay, how are you doing?
I'm good. I have a question about, so I already submitted my application and now all I can do is to wait. I actually wonder if there's a time difference between the first consideration deadline and the actual deadline. Like if I submitted first, do I hear from the committee first?
You would probably hear, it's an advantage in a number of ways. And your question's really timely because my colleagues were just discussing this at a meeting today. A, you would hear faster, but B, you would get more consideration because the spots fill up quickly. So the people who apply before January the 18th have the committee will meet shortly after that and will make decisions. So there may be applications that trickle in after that, but they're not going to get the same level of consideration. So it is an advantage that you have your application in.
I see. Yeah, thank you.
Any more questions?
I'd like to add that it's particularly good to have your application in early in relation to reference letters, because when you put your reference letter information on the application, professors are getting a multitude of requests from various students, and it may take X amount of weeks for them to get to that, and your application wouldn't be complete until those documents are submitted. So the earlier you submit it, the system can request that they fill out the form and they can get it to us faster. So it doesn't delay the review of your application.
Yeah, this is something I would suggest based on, as a professor, I'm approached for a lot of reference letters. I've also seen the process play out with my two adult kids. The absolute earliest you approach your references, the better. And I would say I would recommend you tell them that you need the reference letters by the end of this semester, because things get really crazy as the semester is starting up, and people tend to procrastinate, right? So give them at least 3 weeks notice, but ideally say that, you would like your reference letters by the time the semester ends. I don't think that's an unreasonable request for your professors. I hope not. And Paula.
Hi, I have another question in terms of the portfolio. I have no experience in journalism, but I do have a lot of experience researching and writing. Would submitting, let's say, part of my thesis or 2 excerpts from my thesis be okay? Like, would that work?
It depends how you frame it. To be really honest with you, it's not, usually people on the committee aren't particularly grabbed by academic writing. But if you say, this is evidence of my research skills, and this is the kind of research I had to do to produce this, and these are the research skills that I would take into journalism, I think that will really help. So it's all how you frame it.
Okay, but does that mean that most people, like, say, coming in to the program do have some experience in journalism? Like, it's expected from students?
Usually in the portfolio, there are journalistic pieces, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Violet?
Yeah, I had two, like, I would say somewhat quicker questions maybe. One of them is, how many new students typically, or like a range, are accepted each year into the program? And then the other one is just wondering, in terms of the portfolio, if you accept new media submissions as well as print journalism.
To start with that, yes, for your last question, we do accept new media submissions. And in terms of the numbers, all I can tell you is this year we have, I believe, Daniel, 21 students who are actually in the program. It depends, sometimes it's a couple more. It depends on the number of faculty we have as well, in terms of the numbers that we accept each year.
Great, thanks.
Martha, just so you know, there's a question from Sheila, and this would be good for actually for everyone to hear. So she's asking about if there's special considerations for mature students, for example, with the letters of recommendation, right? So if they graduated several years before, maybe they are not in contact with the professors, you know, can the program accept other types of things?
Yes, is the bottom line. So Sheila, yeah, it happens. Unfortunately, there are professors who do retire, but you can, if you have other people who can talk about your skills, your knowledge. Sheila, I don't know if you've done any journalistic volunteering or anything that's related, but can you think of people who would be appropriate for a journalistic application? Okay, and you can say too, Sheila, you can mention in your cover letter that these are the people, you have your references because they know your work and they can speak for you. And if you think there's any need, you can actually say something positive about your references in your cover letter. Let's see.
Just another piece of advice too, just for everyone in terms of your letters of reference and for letters of recommendation, make sure that you follow up with your referees. Sometimes the email that comes from Ryerson to them asking them to submit the letter goes into their spam mailbox, and they will know they have to submit it. So make sure about 5 days after you submit your application in step 1, you'll get an email. So as soon as you get your email, your referee should get the email around the same time, maybe a couple of days after the latest. So make sure you follow up with them a few days after that to make sure that they got it. They can go online and submit the reference, right? Because sometimes the applications will get stuck in the system and we don't see them. And if you don't follow up, we don't know, and then you might miss the deadline because of that. So it's always important to check with them.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Hi, I'm Vaishnavi here, and do you hear me?
I do now, yes.
I'm currently studying law in India, and I want to know what are my chances of getting admitted into the master's program.
Well, it depends on your application. It depends on your cover letter. Let us know what your commitment to journalism is. Let us know that you're bringing skills as a trained lawyer, because often in journalism, the skills overlap in terms of critical thinking. So it really depends. I mean, your chances are as good as anybody's chances, but play up an interesting background. It depends. And do you have material for your portfolio?
Actually, I'm only in my second year of law as of now. I have 3 years time ahead. Okay, I just want to.
Okay, well, we'd look at your application letter. We'd look at what you say about your background, your experience, the same way we do this with everyone. We'd look at your portfolio. So your chances are as good as anybody else's. I'm just thinking, the things that I think you can do, all of you, to improve your chances are really think about your cover letter, or think about what you tell us about the journalism that has shaped you, that you engage with. Think long and hard about why you want to go into journalism in this day and age, and make sure that that comes across. Bolster your portfolio as much as you can. Get your application in before that January 18th deadline. And I think in terms of the committee, those are all things that will help you and will help everybody who's here.
Just a quick follow-up on that, just because I heard you mentioned you have a 3-year degree. Is that correct, Vaishnavi?
Actually, I'm into a 5-year integrated program. So
Okay, perfect.
I'm in the 2nd year of my program. I just want to be ahead of things. So.
Yeah, no, that's great. The reason why I bring that up is because international students, and I just put a link on the chat for everyone, but international students should always check the international equivalencies for degrees. So the requirement is a 4-year bachelor minimum, right? So depending where you study, sometimes degrees are 3 years, sometimes they're 5, sometimes they're 4. So make sure you check the equivalencies there to make sure you have it, and that way you can guarantee that your application, you'll at least cover that one step of the requirements. But yeah, if you had 5 years, you're probably okay.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Sophia.
Sorry, I just have one more question about the major project. So if I say I choose the magazine for my focus masterhead, do we need to publish the work at the end of graduation?
It should be publishable, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that everyone who finishes an MRP actually does publish, but that's the standard that you should be aiming for.
Sure thing. And if I wanted to publish, do I need to pitch the story to the magazine by myself, or I can ask for?
You can ask for advice, but basically, yes, you would be pitching. If you take the magazine masthead, you are connected with people who work in the magazine industry. So that's really helpful in terms of figuring out where to pitch, and you will certainly be learning how to pitch.
Sure thing. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, Violet.
Another question here. Do folks who get placed with the internship in the program oftentimes end up getting a job more long-term once they graduate with that same organization that they internship with?
Some people do, some people don't. It really depends on the organization. I know recently, just speaking to students I used to teach, CBC has been a pretty tough nut to crack. So people do get internships there, but it doesn't guarantee anything. Some places seem to be more receptive. I know we've had students who've done internships with the Toronto Star and have ended up working with the Toronto Star. It really depends on the place. I mean, it goes without saying, wherever you are, you need to make a fabulous impression so that they really want to hire you. And then the next question is, can they afford to hire anyone at this particular time? So I guess the short answer is yes, sometimes.
Okay, thank you.
And is that a library you're in, did you say?
Oh, sorry, no, I think someone else is. I'm in the student radio station at UBC.
Oh, okay, because I'm looking at all of the newspaper articles.
Yeah, we have a magazine as well. So I think there's some cutouts from our magazine.
Oh, nice. Okay. I think one of our faculty just joined UBC Communications and Writing. I don't know if that's the general area. But anyway, Kamal Al-Salali from our school, he just went out to UBC. Anyway, just wondering. I don't see other hands up this moment. But I'm glad you've all been asking questions because that's a very journalistic thing to do. Okay, I'm going back to gallery view just to see if there's any other hands. I don't see any. So I think that's it then. If nobody has any more questions, what do you think, Daniel?
Yeah, if that's the case, I'm just going to mention one thing just quickly about scholarships, so you guys know. There's program funding for the applicants when they come in, and this is based on obviously your application, based on admissions, and the committee will review that, and we'll sort of let the applicants, successful applicants, know when that's there. So there's not a lot you have to do in that sense in terms of looking for them or applying. It's basically automatic. This range between $1,000 to $12,000, up to $15,000 for some of the bigger ones like the Ontario Graduate Scholarship or the Ryerson Graduate Scholarship. Now I will put a link on the chat, however, for the rest of the scholarships. This is from the Graduate Studies website, so you should definitely check that out. This is basically the best list we have of all the scholarships that the university sort of manages. So take a look in there. You are the best person to know if you're eligible for them or not, because they have a variety of different requirements. So this will be a little bit of research for you guys to basically go through them, which ones are eligible, which ones are not. There's a calendar you can subscribe to so you don't miss the deadlines for any of them, and make sure you apply if you're looking for funding.
Sorry.
So the second part of funding, I would say, is there are some teaching assistant positions and research assistant positions and graduate assistant positions at the university that you're all, as a student, will be eligible to apply. And I will also post the link for that. Those are usually posted online. The program may have a few, and if that's the case, we'll contact you. We'll contact students directly when that happens. But otherwise, I'll just post it on the website, which I'll add to the chat in a few seconds. Yeah. Go ahead,
Okay,
Marsha.
Carolyn, I'm going to get to your question in a minute, but I want to ask Daniel a question because this came up today in a faculty meeting as well. Is there any way when students actually get their offer of admission, is there a way to offer OGS, TA, or RA at the same time in the same letter of admission? How does that work?
We usually, so when a student gets accepted, basically that comes from admissions. So what happens is the students will get a letter, a notification, and basically say, congratulations, you've been accepted into the program. Within that letter, we can put, we'll let you know, if you receive funding, the amount of funding that's there, and so students know what they're accepting, right? Their offer plus X amount of funding. For TAGA opportunities, generally speaking, we'll email you separately, because if sometimes the deadlines, depending when you get accepted, the school or the program may not know who's getting a TA or a GA position, just because it's if you're looking at February or March for the first round of offers, that's 6 months ahead of the next school year. So we don't know which course is going to have a TA or a GA and so on. But we might be able to say, you know what, as part of your offer, we will also offer you a TA or a GA position via email on a separate note from the specific admissions offer that you get.
And for OGS, do students have to apply for OGS, and then you can let them know, as you let them know, basically, that they're accepted?
OGS has different deadlines as well. So that's one of the scholarships that we sort of automatically reviewed your application. Everybody who basically gets an acceptance offer will review them, make sure they meet the requirements for the GPA, which is usually the last 2 completed years of the study has to have a minimum of A- GPA equivalent. And so at our end, when we submit your application, we'll review those. We'll figure out who qualifies. We will have to contact whoever qualifies to submit I think it's 1 or 2 page form, just basically saying that you want to apply and yes, you want to be considered for the scholarship. We'll then submit that to the review committee, and it's split in 2 ways. It's basically a faculty competition, and it's also a university-wide competition that they split the numbers of the scholarships in 2, basically. And then as soon as we know that information, that probably won't be until, I think this year happened around May, June. So again, depending when your offer gets sent out, if you got your offer beforehand, before May and June, you may not, it may not be attached to your offer letter, but we'll let you know afterwards. if someone gets accepted after that, and we may be able to let them know at the same time. But generally speaking, because of the deadline, so GS happens afterwards, and usually, I mean, it comes with good news, right? Because like, yeah, congratulations, you receive an Ontario Graduate Scholarship or a Ryerson Graduate Scholarship worth value of $15,000, and this will replace the original funding that you might have received, which might have been usually lower, $2,000, $3,000, depending on the students, right?
Okay, great. And Carolyn, so your question is, if students are interested in pursuing journalism in countries outside of Canada, how well does the content from the masters translate to a global field? Very well. I mean, obviously, if you are practicing journalism somewhere else, you're going to have to steep yourself in the politics, the economics, the business climate of the country. But you will have the fundamentals that should translate really well to any other country. Did you want to, Carolyn, do you have any follow-up on that? Okay, oh, here's another question. Let me just find out before we get to Violet, does that answer your question? Yeah, okay, I see, great. And Violet, is tuition for domestic and international students the same, or is it more expensive for international students? It is more expensive. Daniel will know how much more expensive.
Yes, it is more expensive because the domestic tuition is subsidized by the government. International tuition is not. In terms of the actual amounts, I will post a link in the chat, but hold on one second. You think I know this by heart, but 1 second.
I know it's very expensive.
Yeah, so
I don't know the dollar amount.
For international students, tuition, right now, by the way, this is the numbers for the 2021-2022 academic year. It'll be very, very similar for the 22 to 23 academic year, which is what you would be applying for. But it's around $25,100 basically for international students. And for domestic students, it's around, I think it's around 10,200 or something like that. So it is a little more because, again, domestic tuition is subsidized by Canadian government. The international tuition is not subsidized, unfortunately, just because, yeah.
It is per year. I'd understood that including the summer for domestic students, it was 26,000.
No, hold on.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, so for domestic students, for a full year, 3 semesters, that's fall, winter, and spring, summer, is 10,400.
Okay.
And then 25,100 for international students. Now that's per year. So the program, the journalism program, is basically a year and a half long. So it's 5 terms. So basically in the first year, you'll pay 3 terms, which is the full amounts I just mentioned. But in the second year, you only pay basically 2/3 of that amount. So it'll be around 6 or 7 for domestic, and around 18 or so for international on the second year.
I'm really glad to hear that, because I think the figures I was given were for international students. So even though it's a lot, it's certainly less for domestic students, because I think many of you were asking about international students. Violet, are you an international student, or you were just curious?
Yeah, I'm at a Canadian university currently, but I'm originally from the US, so I would be an international student.
Okay.
I don't have citizenship in Canada, in other words.
Okay, so you qualify as international. What's this? Do courses offered by platforms like Coursera hold any value in my portfolio? It depends what you've done for the courses. If you did a course in journalism through Coursera and you did a journalistic assignment for the course, you could certainly include the journalistic assignment in your portfolio. But in terms of actually looking at the grades, my understanding is we wouldn't be looking at the grades from a Coursera course, even if it were graded.
That's correct. In admissions, we only look at grades from your undergraduate degree.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Is it fixable if we fail to meet the conditions on the offer? I'm supposing it depends on specific scenarios. I imagine that that's a very general question, and I guess it would depend on which conditions you fail to meet, but that's really a question for Tanisha and Daniel. And when you send in your application, I mean, there are some conditions that are problematic. For example, if you're an international student and you have a 3-year degree and you don't have a 4-year degree. For a domestic student, I'm not sure what kind of condition. Do you want to give us a clue? What kind of conditions are you thinking about?
I'm thinking of maybe GPA wise. That's the only one I'm considering.
Okay, it is, I mean, it's fixable because there's another no, maybe not. I don't know. What do you guys?
So it's a possibility. Now it's difficult mostly in terms of because you're in a sense you're competing with a lot of people, right? So what's going to happen is admissions will review the application we call a holistic way, which is you have your other components. You have your GPA is one of them. You do have other components in there, like the statement of interest, your background, your experience, your CV, et cetera, portfolio. So admissions may say, you know what, this student doesn't have the exact B- requirement, or maybe they're 1 decimal point below or slightly below. So they might actually just send that to us for the review committee. The review committee will then review everything else, match it, make sure it's also good, figure out, get the score. Now it does obviously have certain, I mean, the GPA does affect your application in certain portions, right? Because there's different ways of, getting the final score for your review for the application. So in that sense, it might, depending on the GPA, it might be if it's really low, then admissions might say, this student unfortunately can't perform academically. If there's no other proof in there, for example, some people, when they have, maybe they had a really bad 4th year of undergrad for whatever reason, right? There's always circumstances in the world we don't know. I mean, mainly a global pandemic, for example. Who knows? So basically, in situations like that, sometimes what we recommend is people, okay, go take university level courses that are, at same level as if you had a degree, just to show that, what, maybe that year I had a bad year and I did really poorly, but now I'm performing amazingly. My grades are 8+, A+, or whatnot. It won't necessarily replace your last year of undergrad, because that's still the grades they use, but it will show the admissions department and the review committee that you can perform academically and you've improved whatever it was that happened that 1 year, for example, right? So that's sort of a way of sometimes admissions will look at things, and then they'll send it to us, then the review committee will look at the whole application, and then from there it will then depend based on competition and how many other amazing applications we have, how many of them have high GPAs, low GPAs, their background, a whole bunch of different factors. So hopefully that can answer your question. So there's some flexibility a little bit, but generally speaking, it does depend on competition and the rest of your application.
Mm-hmm. Which university are you at, Sophia?
I'm in my last year of English major at University of Alberta.
Right. Okay. I think last year I did see the GPAs, and I don't think there were too many people who got below a B+ who actually got a place in the program. Most people were A-range students, but not everybody. And if you blow us away with your portfolio, or there's another aspect of your application that's very strong and very promising, then the committee does take that into account.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Thank you.
GPAs in general tend to be lower, I've noticed, at the big research universities like U of A or U of T, McGill, UBC. Those GPAs do tend to be lower in general. So yeah, I don't know what to make of it. It's not like we consciously adjust for that, but it's just an observation. Okay, Well, thank you all for coming. Thanks, Danielle. Thanks, Tanisha. And on the website, if you think of a question at 3 o'clock in the morning, you can always contact the university and just ask as a follow-up. So I'll let you go and have a great night. Bye now.
The Creative School.